In November 2005, on a quiet morning in a crowded apartment complex, a horrific murder occurred, sending shockwaves through the community. A young woman was found dead in her apartment, surrounded by strange signs and perplexing details. Upon receiving the report, the criminal investigation team immediately sprang into action, determined to uncover the truth behind this mysterious death. Small clues, seemingly insignificant, gradually became the key to unlocking a dark story filled with chilling twists. The investigation was not just a complex puzzle for the police, but a reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers come from those who seem closest and most familiar. Join us on a challenging and dramatic journey of solving the case, where each step leads to unexpected turns and reveals secrets no one could have imagined. Semen traces detected in the victim's mouth. On a cold November morning in 2005, Zhang Guoqiang, a railway operator, returned to his apartment after a grueling night shift. His home was located in a quiet residential compound where working-class families lived. As he entered the familiar small room, he froze in horror at the ghastly sight before him. His wife, Li Suhua, lay motionless on the bed, her body covered only by a thin piece of cloth. Blood had soaked the bedsheet and spread to the floor. The chilling, deathly atmosphere engulfed the entire room. Panic-stricken and shocked, Zhang Guoqiang immediately called the police, his voice trembling with fear. Upon receiving the report, the criminal investigation team, led by Captain Tian Jianhua, quickly arrived at the scene. The apartment area was immediately cordoned off to preserve the evidence. The investigation team set up barriers to separate the crime scene from the rest of the compound. Curious neighbors were asked to keep their distance to prevent contamination of the scene. Captain Tian Jianhua directed the investigators to divide into multiple teams to ensure no detail was overlooked. One team was responsible for gathering information from the neighbors. Another focused on examining the crime scene. The forensics team began an on-site autopsy before moving the victim to the morgue for further analysis. The scene was meticulously examined down to the smallest detail. Investigators used rubber gloves and specialized tools to avoid altering or destroying evidence. There were no signs of forced entry. The main door and windows were intact, with no signs of tampering or damage. The furniture remained in its place. Items such as the tea table, books, handbags, and picture frames had not been disturbed. Using UV light, investigators scanned surfaces in the room, hoping to find fingerprints, blood stains, or other tangible evidence. However, no foreign fingerprints were detected. The room seemed devoid of obvious clues about the perpetrator. Li Suhua lay on the bed, naked, with multiple deep stab wounds concentrated in her chest and abdomen. The stab wounds varied in depth, some piercing internal organs and causing severe blood loss. The forensic examination identified this as the primary cause of death. Additionally, there were large bruises on her neck, indicating forceful strangulation that damaged her trachea. During the body examination, forensic experts discovered semen traces in 2 locations: the victim's genitals and mouth. These traces were immediately collected for DNA analysis to identify the perpetrator. Small scratches on the victim's arms and under her nails suggested she had resisted before being completely overpowered. Based on the condition of the scene and the autopsy results, the police concluded that this was a locked-room murder case. The lack of disruption suggested the perpetrator might have known the victim or deliberately erased all traces before leaving. The absence of foreign fingerprints or shoe prints posed significant challenges for the investigation. Captain Tian Jianhua instructed the investigators to conduct a deeper analysis of the biological samples collected at the scene. The semen traces could be the most crucial clue to identifying the perpetrator. Shocking secrets of the victim's complex life. At the same time, another investigative team was tasked with gathering information about the victim's personal relationships. particularly those who had recently interacted closely with her. Although the crime scene did not immediately yield direct evidence of the perpetrator's identity, the initial clues suggested that this was not a random break-in, but might be linked to personal conflict or sexual motives. The perpetrator might have been in the apartment before the crime occurred, or the victim may have willingly opened the door for them. The investigation focused on determining Lee Soo-hwa's social and marital relationships while analyzing biological evidence to narrow down the suspect pool. During the investigation, police uncovered a shocking secret about Lee Soo-hwa's life. On the surface, she appeared to be a gentle wife and a diligent homemaker in her small apartment, while her husband, Zhang Guoqiang, worked night shifts in the railway industry. In reality, Lee Soo-hwa was working as a high-end prostitute, a secret her husband was entirely unaware of. Upon examining the victim's messages and call history, police discovered that on the night of the murder, Lee Soo-hwa had texted a regular client named Wang Liang, inviting him to her apartment. This was unusual since their previous encounters typically took place in discreet locations outside. Her decision to invite Wang Liang to her home raised suspicions about a special relationship between them. DNA results and alibi evidence. Wang Liang, a successful businessman and a longtime client of Lee Soo-hwa, was quickly summoned for questioning. When asked about his relationship with the victim, he did not deny being at her apartment that night. According to his statement, he and Lee Soo-hwa were together for about 2 hours, and he left at 10 p.m. His statement was supported by the DNA test results. The semen sample found on the victim's body matched Wang Liang's DNA, making him the prime suspect. However, the case took a turn when police investigated Wang Liang's movements more thoroughly that night. Since the building where Lee Soo-hwa lived lacked security cameras, the police could not confirm the exact time Wang Liang left. Fortunately, security cameras at Wang Liang's home recorded him returning at 10:45 p.m. This aligned with his statement that he left the victim's apartment at 10 p.m. and drove straight home. His housemate also confirmed seeing him return around that time. Forensics determined the victim's time of death to be between 11:30 p.m. and midnight, at least an hour and a half after Wang Liang left the apartment. If his account was accurate, he could not have been at the scene when the murder occurred. Although his DNA was found on the victim's body, it only proved that he was present before the crime, not that he committed the murder. No blood, fingerprints, or other items belonging to him were found at the scene to incriminate him. The police continued to analyze other biological traces but found no evidence that Wang Liang returned to the apartment after he left. Given the collected data, the police had to eliminate Wang Liang as a suspect. Eliminating Wang Liang from the suspect list pushed the investigation into a temporary deadlock. Why did Lee Soo-hwa break her professional rule by inviting a client to her home, something she had never done before? Was someone watching her and exploiting the situation to commit the crime? If so, who was the perpetrator? And how did they enter the apartment without leaving any signs of forced entry? The police now had to broaden the investigation, examining Lee Soo-hwa's other relationships, from neighbors to clients she had interacted with. They also delved deeper into her marriage with Zhang Guoqiang, the husband who seemed unaware of his wife's double life. Every detail at the crime scene was re-examined. Biological samples, even the smallest traces of blood or fingerprints, were analyzed using advanced technology. Police re-interviewed neighbors in the building, hoping to find witnesses who had seen or heard anything unusual on the night of the murder. At this point, the investigation was no longer just a pursuit of the killer, but an exploration of the deep secrets in Lee Soo-hwa's life, aimed at uncovering the true motive behind her tragic death. Second suspect, the investigation reaches a deadlock. After ruling out Wang Liang as a suspect, the police pursued new leads, focusing on Lee Soo-hwa's personal relationships, particularly those who might have held grudges or harbored hostility toward her. The lack of signs of forced entry or theft suggested a personal motive behind the crime. During questioning, several witnesses reported that Li Suhua had a heated argument with a woman who lived in the same apartment building. This woman suspected Li Suhua of having an affair with her husband and had threatened her during a public confrontation in the hallway. The argument occurred not long before the murder, making her a suspect. However, when summoned, the woman admitted to her suspicions but insisted the threat was made in a moment of anger. To clarify, the police verified her alibi. Investigation results showed that on the night of the murder, the woman attended a party with friends at a location far from the scene. Surveillance cameras and witnesses at the party confirmed this, forcing the police to eliminate her as a suspect. Undeterred, the police delved into Li Suhua's past, particularly the period when she worked at a company before secretly entering sex work. Some former colleagues revealed that she had conflicts with a few individuals at the company. A male employee, previously accused of harassing her and subsequently demoted, denied any thoughts of revenge. Another female colleague accused Li Suhua of stealing a promotion opportunity, but claimed they had no further contact after she left the company. Despite expanding the investigation and interviewing multiple people who had conflicts with Li Suhua, the police found no compelling evidence to identify the culprit. Clues at the scene, such as DNA samples and fingerprints, did not match anyone in the suspect list. There was no physical evidence, new testimony, or clear motive to bring the investigation closer to solving the case. The investigation began to stall, with all hypotheses leading to dead ends. Mystery of the semen sample in the victim's mouth and the blue fiber. The police revisited the initial clues, reanalyzing the evidence and trying to determine if the perpetrator might be someone completely outside the current suspect pool. During the investigation, many major questions remained unanswered. Was the perpetrator someone who knew Li Suhua's habits and secret work? Or was this a random act by a stranger who left no clear traces? If the perpetrator was familiar with the victim, why were there no signs of a major struggle at the scene? The police hypothesized that the case might be linked to Li Suhua's secret work as a high-end prostitute. Was she involved with a criminal organization or a psychopath seeking revenge or hiding a bigger secret? Facing a deadlock, the investigative team decided to change tactics. They expanded surveillance footage review around the building, hoping to identify anyone entering or leaving the area on the night of the murder. They also requested forensic experts to conduct a more detailed analysis of the biological samples found at the scene, including footprints, hair, and fabric fibers. Although the case showed no significant progress, the police remained determined. They hoped that even the smallest detail would eventually unravel the mystery behind Li Suhua's death. After weeks of investigation without finding concrete leads, the case fell into a deadlock. The avenues of inquiry, from personal conflicts and revenge motives to tracing the victim's secret relationships, yielded no results. The silence of the crime scene and the lack of eyewitnesses left the investigation at a standstill. Captain Tian Jianhua convened a meeting, urging the team to review every detail of the case. He emphasized that no crime is ever perfect enough to leave no trace. He demanded that all forensic and crime scene reports be re-examined with fresh eyes. During the review of the forensic report, Tian Jianhua noticed an overlooked detail. The semen sample in the victim's mouth had never been tested. Earlier reports focused only on the genital sample. This oversight might have caused the investigation to miss a crucial lead. He immediately ordered testing of the semen sample from the victim's mouth. The results were shocking. The two semen samples on the victim's body belonged to different men. This indicated that at least two men had intimate contact with the victim shortly before her murder. This discovery opened a new line of investigation, making the case even more complex. Recognizing the significance of this breakthrough, Tian Jianhua directed the team to return to the crime scene and the forensic team to re-examine the body, focusing on overlooked details. While examining the victim's teeth closely, the forensic team discovered a tiny blue fiber stuck between them. Under a microscope, The fiber was identified as a synthetic material commonly used in uniforms for security guards or workers. This fiber did not match any of the victim's clothing or items in the apartment, making it a crucial piece of evidence. Furthermore, the lack of signs of intrusion and the absence of witnesses who saw the suspect entering or leaving led the police to believe the perpetrator might be someone familiar or who worked in the area. Such a person would have a legitimate reason to be in the building without drawing attention. The investigation now focused on people who could access the building without suspicion, with the hope of finally uncovering the truth behind Lee Soo-hwa's mysterious death. Tracking the blue fiber, the perpetrator revealed. The difference in the sources of the semen samples and the discovery of the blue fiber compelled the police to reconsider the entire case. The initial theory of a single perpetrator was gradually replaced with a new hypothesis. Perhaps two people were directly involved with the victim before her murder. The question arose, were they accomplices? Or did one commit the crime after the other left? Could the blue fiber belong to one of these two individuals or an unidentified third party? The investigation team immediately expanded the suspect list, focusing on people who worked or frequently appeared near the building, such as security guards, construction workers, or anyone wearing blue uniforms. At the same time, forensic experts were tasked with a more detailed analysis of the fiber to determine its specific type, manufacturer, and relevant characteristics. With this new direction, the police compiled a list of everyone who had interacted with Lee Soo-hwa in the weeks leading up to her murder. They paid particular attention to those who knew about her habits and secret work. DNA samples from these individuals were collected and compared to the two semen samples found on the victim's body. Additionally, the team sought more witnesses or indirect evidence to identify anyone who entered or left Lee Soo-hwa's apartment on the night of the murder. They also investigated companies that produced and distributed uniforms made from synthetic blue fabric, hoping to narrow down the search. Despite new leads, the case grew more complicated. Details such as the two distinct semen samples and the blue fiber opened multiple theories while also raising difficult questions. Was there one perpetrator or two? If two, were they connected? How did the perpetrator access the victim without leaving signs of forced entry? The police knew that even the smallest detail could be the key to solving the case. Armed with this new information, they resolved to push forward, considering every possibility to uncover the truth. Following leads from the blue fiber and the distinct DNA samples, the police focused on security guards or workers in the area. These individuals could move through the apartment complex without arousing suspicion. During the investigation, one name stood out, Ju Song-young, a night shift security guard at the building where Lee Soo-hwa lived. Initially, Ju Song-young appeared calm and cooperative when summoned for questioning. However, investigators quickly noticed inconsistencies. He had a visible scratch on his hand, but his explanations were contradictory, claiming at times that it was a work injury, and at other times that he got it while cleaning windows. Moreover, he frequently glanced around, showed signs of anxiety, and sweated profusely when asked about his activities on the night of the murder. The police decided to request a DNA sample from Ju Song-young to compare with the semen sample found in the victim's mouth. The results were as expected. The DNA matched the sample from the victim. This discovery confirmed his direct involvement in the crime. Ju Song-young was detained for further questioning. Cornered by the irrefutable DNA evidence, he finally bowed his head and confessed to his actions. When sexual desire turns into crime. Ju Song-young confessed that he had long been obsessed with Lee Soo-hwa. As the building's security guard, he had the perfect opportunity to observe her daily habits. He knew that she frequently brought strange men to her apartment and had heard rumors within the complex about her work as a prostitute. These things filled him with jealousy and fueled twisted thoughts. According to Ju Song-young's testimony, on the night of the murder, he intentionally watched Lee Soo-hwa's apartment. When he saw Wang Liang, one of her clients, leave and noticed that the door to her apartment was not locked, he decided to seize the opportunity to slip inside. At that moment, he had one thought in mind: to force her to service him the same way she did with other men. He recounted that when confronting Li Suhua, he demanded she comply with his desires. However, she immediately and firmly refused, ordering him to leave and threatening to call the police if he didn't. Her resolute rejection enraged him. Overcome with fury, feeling scorned and out of control, he lunged forward and began choking her to subdue her. Li Suhua struggled desperately, but he was stronger and choked her until she fell unconscious. Seeing her motionless, Zhu Songyang intended to commit sexual assault but failed. Instead, he used the victim's mouth to satisfy his long-repressed desires. He confessed that this act was the peak of his rage and twisted lust. While he was committing this depraved act, Li Suhua suddenly regained consciousness and tried to scream for help. Panicked that her cries would be heard by others, he became frantic. In a frenzy, he grabbed a fruit knife from the nearby kitchen and repeatedly stabbed her chest and abdomen, ensuring she could neither scream nor resist any longer. Blood spread across the bed, and as Li Suhua collapsed, he realized he had committed a horrific crime. Terrified, he fled the scene, taking the weapon and his blood-stained clothes to dispose of them. He admitted that after leaving the apartment, he threw the knife into a canal near his workplace, believing no one would find it. He also washed his bloody clothes that night to erase any evidence. The next day, he deliberately returned to work behaving normally, hoping no one would suspect him, especially since there were no security cameras in the building to capture his actions. However, his attempts to cover up his crime could not deceive the police. The scratch on his hand, his erratic behavior during questioning, and the matching DNA sample all exposed Zhu Songyang's true nature. When asked about his motive, Zhu Songyang admitted that jealousy and feelings of being slighted drove him to commit the crime. He felt insulted seeing Li Suhua with other men while he, despite being around her often, was ignored. His sick mentality and lack of self-control turned him into a ruthless killer. Zhu Songyang also acknowledged that if the opportunity hadn't presented itself that night, with the apartment door left unlocked, he might not have acted on his impulses. But when the chance arose, he was unable to restrain his dark thoughts and acted on his criminal instincts. The charges and severe sentence for the perpetrator. With a detailed confession and irrefutable evidence, Zhu Songyang was prosecuted in court for multiple serious crimes under the provisions of the Criminal Code. 1. Murder, Article 123 of the Criminal Code. His deliberate act of taking Li Suhua's life was determined to be exceptionally serious and barbaric. Zhu Songyang repeatedly stabbed the victim's chest and abdomen to conceal his prior crimes. This act not only resulted in death, but also instilled fear and outrage in society. 2. Rape, Article 141 of the Criminal Code. Zhu Songyang exploited the victim's unconscious state to commit oral rape. This act severely violated the victim's dignity and honor, warranting strict legal punishment. 3. Unlawful entry of residence, Article 158 of the Criminal Code. His entry into Li Suhua's apartment without her consent violated the citizens' right to the inviolability of their home. 4. Concealing a crime and destroying evidence, Article 389 of the Criminal Code. Zhu Songyang deliberately disposed of the weapon and washed his blood-stained clothes to erase evidence, hindering the investigation process. The verdict by the trial counsel. 1. For murder, Zhu Songyang was sentenced to death. The council concluded that his actions posed extreme danger to society, were barbaric in nature, and caused irreparable harm. The death penalty aims to deter and prevent similar crimes in the future. 2. For rape, the defendant was sentenced to 15 years in prison and ordered to pay compensation for emotional distress to the victim's family. 3. For unlawful entry of residence, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. to be served consecutively with the primary sentence. 4. For concealing a crime and destroying evidence. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison to reinforce the deterrent effect against obstruction of justice. Additional penalties. Financial compensation. Zhu Songyang must cover the full costs of the funeral, emotional damages, and other losses incurred by the victim's family. Asset forfeiture. All assets related to his criminal activities will be confiscated. This severe sentence is not only a fitting punishment for the perpetrator, but also a stark warning to society about barbaric and inhumane criminal acts. What are your thoughts on the perpetrator and the victim in today's case? Leave a comment below to join the discussion with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Decoder Box channel so you won't miss out on thrilling crime stories from around the world. Goodbye and see you in the next video.